Welcome to the AOA Future in Orthopedic Surgery podcast series. This AOA podcast series will focus on the future in orthopedic surgery and the impact on leaders in our profession. These podcasts will focus on the vast spectrum of change that will occur as the future reveals itself. We will consider changes as they occur in the domains of culture, employment, technology, scope of practice, compensation, and other areas. My name is Doug Lundy, host for this podcast series. Joining us today is Dr. Jennifer Wolf. Dr. Wolf is the Harold and Betsy Newton Professor in the Wallman Society of Fellows of Orthopedic Surgery and Rehabilitation Medicine and Chair of the Department of Orthopedic Surgery and Rehabilitation Medicine at the University of Chicago. Dr. Wolf was born in Harrogate, Yorkshire, England, and grew up in Baltimore, Maryland. She's a graduate of the University of Pennsylvania School of Medicine and completed her orthopedic surgery residency and trauma fellowship at Brown University. She did a fellowship in hand surgery at the Mayo Clinic. Then she completed her PhD in hand surgery in October 2021 at Lund University in Lund, Sweden. She was awarded the Bunnell Traveling Fellowship by the American Society for Surgery of the Hand, as well as the North American Traveling Fellowship and ABC Traveling Fellowships by the American Orthopaedic Association. She's also a member of the AOA Leadership Fellowship Committee. She's been on the ASSH Council for 10 years, including serving as president of ASSH in 2022 to 2023. She has more than 148 publications, 39 book chapters, and has held over $1.5 million in research grants, including DoD funding. Dr. Wolf, welcome to the podcast, ma'am.
Thank you, Dr. Lundy.
All right. So today we are talking about perspectives of a new chair, and you confided in Jodine and I just a minute ago that today is an anniversary for you.
That's correct. A year ago today, on October 1st, 2024, I took over as chair at the University of Chicago. It's funny to think how fast this year has gone.
That's crazy. And we had no intention of timing it like this, but it's super cool that it did. So tell us your path up to like when you were being recruited to be chair and how that all worked out.
Sure. So I have been in academic orthopedics my entire career and was at the University of Colorado, was starting out, then moved to the University of Connecticut, where I held some leadership positions in both research and in some of the operations, and then moved to University of Chicago because it really was the leadership opportunity I was looking for. I became the head of the hand surgery fellowship and ultimately the head of the hand surgery service, and also became the vice chair of faculty development and mentoring, something about which I'm very passionate, having honestly struggled a little bit with mentorship early in my own career. So those were my leadership roles in the institution. And then as stated, I had leadership roles at the American Society for Surgery of the Hand and was honored to do some traveling fellowships at the AOA, from which I learned from a lot of people. The benefit of those traveling fellowships specifically are that you get to meet other leaders. You travel with other leaders, and then you also meet other leaders who were, especially for the North American, we met and sat down with a lot of chairs. So I learned from all those people. And I had always had in the back of my mind that I wanted to do this at the leadership level, to lead a department. And so when that opportunity came open, I applied for it. It was all kind of a long process, and they did a national search. I had certainly been approached by outside institutions at some points in my career as well. So I was sort of familiar with the process. But when this all came to be, I knew I thought what I was getting into, but I learned quickly that despite being with an internal candidate, despite being in leadership in the institution, because the other things I did, actually, I was the physician leader of the outpatient OR. It was funny because people would always assume I knew the players. And at the upper levels of administration, I actually did not know those people. So in many ways, it felt like I was an external person coming in because I had to spend a lot of my first probably 3 to 6 months learning who was in charge, who runs the finances, who runs the finances for the hospital side and the School of Medicine side, who are the people I need to talk to when I want to hire or promote people, because those are things I literally did not know. So it's really been a very interesting journey. It's been quite the learning curve for me to do this. It's been a great honor. I knew parts of the job. I've learned a lot about the other parts of the job, for sure.
That is very, very interesting. So you went from Colorado to Connecticut to Chicago. Um,
Mhm.
so obviously in the private practice world, people will try to go one place and stay there till they retire. That's the optimal goal. But in academic medicine, that's not necessarily the best way to go in terms of advancement in the administrative pathways, right?
I've seen people do it both ways. I
Right.
I think the one thing about staying in an institution for a long time is both you have a lot of loyalty to that institution. You do know all the players. If you stay someplace for your whole career for 35 years, you will know ultimately who all the people are. And there's benefit in that for sure, especially as you rise up through the ranks. For in my own situation, I left Colorado for the research opportunity offered to me by Jay Lieberman, who was the chair at UConn at that time. I was working in research. I had some OREF funding, but Jay offered me the opportunity to really grow and build a lab, and I was able to do that at UConn. And then I left UConn for the leadership opportunity that I really wanted in a fellowship, which really wasn't available to me at UConn since they didn't have an internal hand surgery fellowship. They were associated with more of a private practice model that I was never going to be able to lead. And so I left for that specific leadership opportunity. And so I think I've seen people do this. I think there are benefits when you bring your experience to a different place, but there are also benefits in staying where you are and rising through the ranks that way as well. I think you can be successful both ways.
So I can see younger members listening to this and saying, yeah, I get it. And I am at this crux of my career, this crossroads where I have the opportunity to go somewhere, but it's so scary because I know what I've got here and I don't know what's there. Can you give them any insight, any wisdom that you picked up over the year of how to get through that process or anything that kind of makes you process it to where you can be more decisive in whether you stay or go?
It's a great question. I think you need to know why you're leaving, right? And you want to leave for
Right,
something. You
right.
should not be a leaving to escape something because if you are struggling with where you are, I think the first thing you really want to try to do is fix that, to address that. You want to leave for a better, a greater opportunity, and you want to be clear with yourself as to why you are leaving. It is, I think, easy to be comfortable. It is uncomfortable to leave and go to someplace new. I met with our new faculty because we had a bunch of new faculty who started today and said to them, being in a new place is like having a headache every day for a month. It is. You're meeting all these new people, you're learning all these new things, you're trying to learn everybody's name. It is stressful. And so, yes, you need to make sure that you are doing it for the right reasons. But if the right reasons are clear to you, if you are doing it to, for example, advance your career in one specific facet, then do that and know it and be clear that's why you're doing it. I think those are the things to think about when you think about leaving a job, leaving a practice, leaving an academic spot. You need to make sure you know why you were leaving and that you were going to something that's going to help build you and that you can help build as well.
So one of the advantages of moving, you did not move a lot. You stayed in each place for quite a while before you, and it all makes sense why you moved. But one of the advantages is that you can see a diversity of how people think and do things different places across the country when you're actually living it. When I came here, I did everything I could. I say, whatever you say, do not say, well, when I was in Atlanta, we blank. Nobody cares how you did it in Atlanta. And I caught myself saying it probably way more than I wanted to. I promise you that my people would say that. How are you able to institute change that you brought from UConn, you brought from Colorado into Chicago without being, well, when I was at UConn, comma, we blank?
I think there's ways to do it when what well one you can say, not when I did it this way, when I was there, I would do it that way. You might say, and you might think about saying, have you considered doing it this way? There is a way to actually have people understand your perspective without pushing to say, because I did it this way, that in that place, this is why it's going to work. And I also think that people are much more open to considering new ideas when you don't force it on them, when you don't say, we have to do it this way because I've always done it this way and this is it. And I think instead, I've learned this with trying to institute change in anyway, that you should think about saying, have you considered this? Because I have seen this before and this is how it works. Or I would like to try this because I've seen it work in other places without really hammering them over the head. Because I said it too, and I still say it, right? One of the things I learned when I worked at the University of Colorado, and it's a funny small thing, but it comes to mind in the OR on the East Coast where I was trained, we shaved everybody, right? You're going to do a case, you're going to shave the leg, the arm, whatever. In Colorado, they were like, no, we don't believe in that. And there have been since studies that show it probably doesn't make a difference, but that was the first place I had ever done it. And so when I say that to people who are like ready to shave, and I say, you don't have to do that, and their minds are blown. It's a small thing, but it is a different way of thinking. I think there's a lot of benefit to that. You can bring that perspective to other people.
My people probably wish I had heard you say that prior to me coming here. So how long were you at Chicago before you became chair?
I just finished my 9th year, so 8 years on faculty before I became chair.
All right, great. So obviously there were folks, I mean, you were the internal person that was promoted up to that. Any wisdom as how you, because all of a sudden now you're the boss, and people that were, I mean, you're still friends, but at the end of the day, you can make some very critical decisions for the best, for the benefits of the department that may be, how do you manage that change from being good old Jennifer down the hallway to, oh man, she's the boss?
It's interesting because I do think that in this position, it can be very isolating because in
Right.
the end, you are in a different place than the rest of your faculty. You can be, and I very much try to be transparent, a good listener, supportive. There is no way around the reality that I am in a different spot and I have a different job. And you hit it on the head, right? I make decisions that affect other people. And these people, used to be my colleagues and we were on the same level as colleagues. I think, well, one of the things I do is I will acknowledge that. Yes, this is awkward. This is an awkward conversation, but we need to have it. And want to acknowledge the fact that this is a little bit uncomfortable, but I have to put on my chair hat here and I need to talk to you about X. I think the other thing is to sometimes you have to introduce whatever it is a few times. One of the things I've learned this year is that you cannot over communicate. You need to say things to people a couple of different ways. You need to write them an email. You need to have a conversation with them in person. Same with the department. When I make an announcement, if I send an email, a lot of people are just like, click, that's just a swipe. So sometimes I have to actually say things a number of ways to get things across to people. And it's just because everybody responds to communication differently. But it is definitely a challenge. And being the internal candidate is good and bad in that sense. People know me. People are very comfortable with who I am because I have remained, I think, pretty who I am, and I'm pretty straightforward. I am fairly transparent, and that's something I've really tried to carry forward. But I've also learned that not everybody can know everything. There are things going on the upper levels and upper management or administration that until we're ready to share them, we can't. And I think walking that line is a fine balance. And it's been a challenge to find that balance. And it's a challenge every day. Some days I do better at it than others. And I would acknowledge that as well.
Now, I have good friends in a department, but to your point, there's always, if push comes to shove, I've got to be chair before I'm friend for the best of the department and the network. But I found that some of my better friends were some of the other service line and department chairs. What do you think of that?
So one of the things when you asked that question, I thought of was that still do, meet monthly with the dean of the School of Medicine at U Chicago, who is a great person. And one of the things I said to him is early on, I said, this feels really isolating because I can't talk to people I used to. And he said, you need to lean on your fellow chairs. He said, you need to find fellow chairs who you can bounce things off because they will help you. They are in the same situation and they have been there.
Yeah, Jennifer, I can see that because some of my closest confidants are the chairs of the other departments. But also, I'd like for everybody to know that there is also the chairs forum and the vice chairs forum at the annual meeting, which is another spectacular way for us to know colleagues and other folks that are doing the same walk as we are.
And my chair mentor is the chair of the Department of Surgery. He has been a chair for 22 years. And there is literally nothing he's not seen. So if I have a small problem or a big problem, I can take it to him and say, what's your advice here? And he always has good advice because he literally has seen it all. So he's been a great help and a great person to lean on. And then my other chair mentor is somebody who's actually new to the institution, but was a chair externally before. And so he brings that perspective. And both have been super helpful in mentoring me in this position.
How many vice chairs do you have?
I have 3, but I'm still in the middle of sort of building that group in my department. So we have a vice chair of faculty affairs and research. We have a vice chair of finance, and we have a vice chair for ambulatory affairs.
Any wisdom on how you balance that leadership structure with all that, how that works out?
I think sharing leadership within the department is very important. And it's my future goal, but I've been slow to do it because I needed to rebuild culture in the department. I needed to figure out the administrative staff, which that's been a learning curve for me. I've never really, the only staff I ever previously worked with was my one project assistant and my nurse. And that was it. And now I have a bunch of people who work for me. So that's been my work this year as well. Bringing that leadership within the department and building a leadership structure, I think is a great way to both have a group of people you can bounce ideas off for department level initiatives and other things, and also people who can take some of that work off my shoulders and help with that work. I think that's very important. And I have a future structure in mind, but I'm still working through that structure. And I've said that to my faculty. I'm going to be slow to make these appointments. I don't want to do all this all at once. Although in the beginning, I still think there's a lot of things I want to do. And you do sometimes have to slow down to be effective.
Do you have division chiefs?
We do have division chiefs, yes.
So I've been thinking this through. So we don't per se. And I've got a bunch of total joint arthroplasty adult recon folks. And I have folks that are just amazing, good doctors. They're great surgeons. They're great with their patients. Their indications are spectacular. The residents learn gallons from them. How do I know if that man or that woman can lead the division, or are they a really, really, really good surgeon? That's their sweet spot. Leave them there because that's what they're so darn good at. Or do I take the best doctor and elevate them to division chair and hope that they can somehow develop that section, that leadership section, in addition to their phenomenal clinical section? How do you make that decision?
I think you watch it and you see who rises to the top, who's the natural leader in that group. Because actually, it's an interesting question. So I probably need to qualify my previous answer. We have division chiefs for the most part, but our adult reconstruction is a great example of having a number of people who are at the same level. So who do you pick? They're all
right.
mid-career. Who do you appoint to be the leader of a group of people who are the same, right? There's not just one senior person who rises to the top because they're senior or they have shown leadership. So how do you figure that out? And that's actually been a good question for some of these divisions. Some have a clear leader, some don't. And so I think part of that, one of the strategies I think is actually you ask people to apply for that because you will figure out who wants it.
Oh.
So sometimes for leadership roles, such as vice chair, such as division chiefs, you actually do an application process. It's equitable. It allows people to actually express their interest because if they really don't want it, they don't have to apply. And I actually think that is a way to actually tease out who wants it. Do they have the qualifications? That's the other half of it. And sometimes they don't. But you will at least learn through that process who's interested. And that's half the battle sometimes.
So when I came here, my friend Charlie Salzman told me to read, because it was dramatically different from leadership in the private practice world. He said, read the book, First 90 Days, and do that. And asked a bunch of folks, and they had a lot of salient advice. Did you use any resources when you first started there in terms of how you're going to approach your first X period of time?
So I read the 90 Days book too.
What'd you think?
Useful and not. It's a very businessy book, right? Exactly. I thought to myself, and I mean, one of the things I presented in my chair talk when I was applying is that I was going to spend the first 90 days basically meeting people. And so one of the things, I mean, what I spent my first 90 days doing is taking a lot of notes, meeting with each group. So I met with each subspecialty group. I met with the residents year by year. So I went with the 5s, the 4s, the 3s, the 2s, 1s, and I took them all out to dinner. I met with the APPs. I met with the staff. I met with as many people as I could find. I was given a giant list on the upper levels to meet with the administrators as well. So, I mean, my days were just packed with meetings. And then I was also trying to hire people. So there was a lot of dinners. There's a local restaurant that's near the University of Chicago. And I went there so much. The waiters knew me and they knew exactly what I wanted. I'm like, can I have the usual? And people would be like, oh, what's the usual? I'm like, it's a salad. But I mean, that's what I want. That's what I want for dinner. I know exactly what. So I spent a lot of time meeting a lot of people, taking a lot of notes. And that's really what I spent my first 90 days doing. I read The Wisdom of the Bullfrog, and I read it a lot. It's a little tiny book by Admiral McRaven. So I remind myself of it. It has all these, it's a really small book, but it has great leadership lessons. I read
What's it
Team of
about?
Teams.
What's it?
So the Wisdom of the Bullfrog is actually,
Yeah.
there's chapters, and they're like 3-page chapters. Have a swim buddy. So you have to find your person who is the person you can bounce things off. It has chapters on being where the buck stops. Whatever it is, the responsibility is yours. Own it, acknowledge it, move on. There's a bunch of great things in it. I actually think it's a superb book. I give it to a lot of people. Wisdom of the Bullfrog, senior most member in the Navy, I believe it was.
Okay.
Admiral McRaven. I've read a number of leadership books, but those are the 2 that I read around that time. The other thing I did in this past year is for 6 months, the institution gave me an executive coach, and my executive coach was great because one of the things she did is she would, if I had a conversation I needed to have, she would actually shadow that conversation with me. If I had a difficult conversation, she'd role play with me. She would push me to organize. She would go through kind of what I was thinking and give me some feedback on how that came off to other people and externally. I learned a lot from that process as well. So, I mean, those are the things that I did in the beginning.
Now, part of your job is not just to advocate for the physicians, the orthopedic surgeons, to upper level leadership, but it's also to advocate for upper level leadership to the orthopedic surgeons, which a lot of our partners don't necessarily understand as well as you and I do, because there's important stuff, and upper level leadership is not the enemy. They have very good ideas and they're trying to keep the network successful, and we need to do our part in that. How do you manage that tension between representing the orthopedic surgeons and also relaying the very important initiatives and thoughts that the folks above you have?
It goes back to how you communicate these things, because I do really try to be transparent. My faculty would tell you I do a Friday update email every Friday. It doesn't matter if I'm on vacation, I do it. And some of the things are, what's the financial position of this department? So, are we ahead or behind for the month of August based on number of patients seen or surgeries? So I will share that information. I will share what's going on with the last 6 months have definitely been a bit of a roller coaster with regard to fiscal status of universities, for example, or the financial position of the medical center. So when able, I share that information because I think it's very important that if that's what our administration is telling the chairs, they're telling us because they need us to share it with our faculty. I will share it. So I will share it at the level of the faculty meeting on my Friday updates, but it is a bit of tension because we are both, our job is to advocate and take care of our faculty and our staff and our advanced practice providers, but it's also to be both the communication and to understand and transmit some of the decisions that come down from upper level management. Because good or bad, we are in the administration as well, and we have to own those decisions along with our bosses. My boss is the dean. He works closely with the president of the hospital. I meet with both of them. And so I think it's important that we do understand that position, and it definitely is a balance.
Is there any potential leadership training or anything like that you looked into around this time? I know you said you got your executive coach, which is really pretty great. But is there other stuff that you looked at and say maybe that would help me or not?
Yes, I am going this January to the Harvard Chairs course. So the course for clinical chairs, I attempted to go last year, 3 months in, but 3 months in, I was too late to the game and it was filled, which is fine. I will probably be in a better position, I think, to learn from it this year. But that's a fairly intensive 2-week course, residential at Harvard. So that education, I hope, super valuable and will hopefully be a good decision. I return to a lot, as I said, of my own leadership book training. I love Good to Great. I reread it. I reread it when I took this position because I do think that getting the right people on the bus is the most key thing that I ever can take from that book. And I think about it often. But those are the things that I've to date done in terms of leadership education.
Hedgehog concept too, right?
Hmm.
What drives your economic engine, what you're the best of the world, what you're super passionate about. Yeah.
And what are your goals, right? What are your big, hairy, audacious goals? I think those are the other thing that come out of that book.
And I really appreciate your Friday afternoon emails. What do you do if you don't have much to put in there? You just thank everybody and just acknowledge.
There's always
Or,
something.
okay.
I will announce, and I will send it almost, I send it to the faculty. I tend to send it to our APPs as well. I will sometimes share it with our residents and fellows. Sometimes I'll send it to everyone. So it depends, but I will announce if the residents presented at a meeting. I will announce if one of our faculty got a grant. There's definitely things to announce. Some of them are like, we're not getting merit increases this year, or we give the cost of living increases till later. I put that in there too. So, I mean, some good, some bad, but I do think that we need to put those things in there. I will always put dates upcoming. So the other thing is our resident recruitment, because we expect every faculty member to be there. I put that right on there. Faculty members are all expected to show up. So I will put our research day, which is a full day of research. Again, that's a day we expect everybody there. That's May 6th. I'll start putting that in now because I think the upcoming dates are important as well.
Now, the book Blue Ocean Strategy, I found it to be incredibly helpful. It really has a different way of looking at your competitive environment based on how aggressive the competition is where you are. I would imagine Chicago is as red an ocean as they come in terms of the competitiveness of all the players in there. What's your responsibility as department chair in terms of negotiating the competitive environment within Chicago and advancing your faculty and your services?
So yes, I would acknowledge that Chicago is a very competitive environment. Although the academic medical centers and the private medical centers, we all have our own little piece of the pie, and geographically. My job as chair is to work with our strategy folks to plan our ways of what we're going to do in terms of outreach. We have done a lot in the past 2 years. I've been a part of it for the last year in terms of outreach and building our presence in the suburbs in Northwest Indiana, because we also have a foothold there. And so my job is to recruit clinicians. My job is also to work with our administration to propose how best to position us to do that. So things like building centers or building, an office, or working with one of our joint ventures to rent an office space for our folks to do work, or to figure out who and whether we should populate an outpatient OR surgery center. All things we're doing. So that I spend a lot of my time on that as well.
Is there anything that surprised yourself about yourself as you're going through this process? You're like, wow, I didn't see that part of Jennifer. I didn't think Jennifer would be really great or not so good at something. Anything pop up while you were going through this that you wouldn't necessarily have seen if you weren't in this environment?
I have learned that people management, like the day-to-day management of people like staff, has definitely been my challenge. As I said, I didn't have to manage very many people at all, and now I have to manage a lot of people. So giving people feedback, holding people accountable, doing that in a way that doesn't annoy them, but instead wants to help them come along with me, and figuring out how to use language to do that. Like, I need you to rise to this challenge because I believe you are capable of it. learning to say that to people and learning to have difficult conversations about when people are not performing to what I would expect has been definitely my learning curve. Working with faculty, I'd done that for years. I had done that as vice chair of faculty development. Does it make it easier when you have to mentor somebody who is struggling or to give them negative feedback? It does not. But that I knew I could do. And I knew I was good at it and I remain good at it. I'm doing it from a different perspective, but I knew I could do it. But I'd say working with staff and building staff and hiring staff, that part has been definitely more challenging because it was simply something I wasn't familiar with.
Is there anything you wish you knew before you'd taken the job?
I would certainly say and have said to people this year that the job is more and different than I thought. I think that I knew the pieces about advocating for your faculty and solving clinical problems. But some of the things that have come up have been a surprise to me. I have to handle the relationship between, for example, between people who work on the hospital side because their loyalty is to our department, even though we don't employ them. Handling that, because that's also a bit of a balance, right? They don't directly work for me. I actually have no impact on how they are hired, fired, paid, or anything. But I want to build that loyalty. So I have to do it and I want to do it. But that's been more than I expected. I didn't really expect to be in that position. Trying to figure out the sheer volume of meetings has also been sort of surprising. I knew there were meetings, but I didn't realize quite how many of them there would be. Because if I let it, I would have meetings every day, all day. And the greatest thing about this is I don't, right? The other thing I get to be is still a clinician. I do think that's very important. I had to cut my clinical practice quite a bit, though. But I also think it's still important for me to work as a clinician, to do surgery, to take call, although I have to do less of all of those things because my job is not to do those things. And that has been a hard pill to swallow for my patients. And it's definitely been a hard pill to swallow in some ways for me. So that's the other thing I think is that I have had to learn that I need to be as stricter with myself and with my patients and say, no, I have partners. They can take care of you. And they're like, no, 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 I want you. You'll have to wait then. And I have to push myself to do that and be as strict with myself.
What do you mind me asking what part clinical FTE you are?
I was 0.7. I've cut that in half. So I'm now 0.35.
And then lastly, do you have any advice for younger folks out there who are potentially looking at these opportunities? If you had any advice for anybody, as much as comes to mind in terms of what to consider, what to think about as you enter into this role here?
I think the advice I would give is that work ethic is a big part of proving that you are capable of being a leader because you also need to show up and be capable of doing the work. I think honesty and transparency go a long way with many people. And being able to say, I don't know how I'm going to help you exactly, but I am absolutely willing to try, I think is also very important. I am not good. And I just wrote an article about it. Work-life balance. You know, work is definitely a big part of my life and it takes up a lot of time. But I also think that time is the thing that I've learned is the most valuable. You give people time when you mentor them. You give people time when you do the job. And so you have to be willing, I think, to be flexible with your time because people need that. In a leadership role, you're going to have all kinds of people who need you. And you have to figure out how to balance those needs. So I would say be thoughtful, be honest, be hardworking. You have to show up. You have to show up for people and you have to show up for all the things that you're doing, which means being a leader is about being about others than yourself. That is the other thing about this. It's funny. I always say to a lot of people that my entire career, though, was about building myself, right? I had to build my leadership. I had to build my academic reputation. I had to build my research. I had to do all those things. This job is very different from that. And so I think that's the other thing. That this job is about taking care of other people and building other people. And that's the motivation you want in a leader. So I think that's the thing you have to think about when you want to take a leadership role.
If you had to do it over again, would you do anything different?
No, I don't think so. I feel very fortunate to be in this role. It is definitely, it's a challenge every day. I feel thankfully less like I'm drinking out of a fire hose or like I'm drowning. I felt like both those things when I was trying to learn this role. I still think I'm learning something every day. And I get things right and I get things wrong. And you have to acknowledge that as well. But no, no regrets. It's been great.
I've gotten positive feedback from my friends that are in your department, and y'all just snuck Lisa Tatesman away from UW, didn't you?
We did. We're very excited that Lisa will be joining us in March 2026.
You got Tessa Balash, and you got a whole bunch of real good rock stars over there.
My job to make them all shine. And that's the job. You know, I need to basically build this group because we have a great group and I want to maintain and grow and do incremental improvement every day. It's my job.
Very good. I can't think of a better place to stop than that. So this has been an absolute pleasure talking with Dr. Jennifer Wolf on the reflections of a new chair, and happy anniversary on your 1 year in the job there. Thank you.
Thank you. Much appreciated.
And I hope y'all enjoyed this, and please stay tuned for others in this podcast series.